recluse living in Switzerland, and some people talked about her misanthropy and the fact that she was not very nice, and that's about all I knew about her. But then I went to her archives, which were in Switzerland, and nobody had seen them before, no journalist or biographer. So I was the first person to glance through them, and I spent a week there just looking through this extraordinary material. It was such a treasure trove because every single sexual encounter was there, all the links between her writing and her work, and just the sheer volume of material. There was 8,000 pages of documents to look through. So I kind of came back to London, did a synopsis, took it to my lovely agent, Claire Alexander, who's in the corner, and we took the proposal to Bloomsbury and they published it. And it's about, nearly 20 years ago now that book came out. A beautiful shadow.
And since then there have been two others, but in my opinion yours was the one which really told the full story. I sensed a kind of a real affinity with the subjects, and in fact there's a very little of you in the biography, but right at the end there's a little story about you having this dressing gown which someone had given you which belonged to Highsmith. So I presume by the time you finished the book, I don't know if you wrote that section then, you seemed to be really taken with this dressing gown.
Well, it's an extraordinary thing. I went to see Highsmith's best friend repeatedly over the 5 years it took me to write the book, and she was a wonderful woman called Kate Lindsay Scatterwell. And I went to visit her on a really cold winter's day in New York. And I think she just thought I needed something warm to wear in my hotel room. And it was like a lovely kind of tweed garment that Highsmith had bought from Harrods. But when I sort of started to look at it, you could sort of smell Highsmith on with this garment. And you could see her grey hairs still on the kind of... it was sort of like a musky smell, really. I mean, Highsmith had cats as well, so there's probably a few cats on it over the years. I don't think it's ever been dry cleaned. So right at the end of the book, I have this, and I think it was Claire's idea actually saying, you've got this dressing gown, just write, a page, what it's like to touch Patty's dressing gown on. And it became a symbol, really, of what it was like to inhabit Highsmith's life for those 5 years.
Yeah, because some biographies tend to put too much of the biography into the book, and I felt that was enough. So that led on to you writing your first thriller, not long after publishing that book. And was there much of Highsmith's life and work which influenced your own writing?
Yes, that was a book called The Lying Tongue. It was about a relationship between a young biographer, i.e. me, but a psychopathic version of me, I want to say, who goes to Venice he becomes fascinated by this reclusive older male writer called Gordon Crace, and something secret has happened in his past, and it's a battle of wills between the subject and the young biographer.
Okay, so how much of the writing of the biography of Highsmith had sort of generated something, the ideas that led to, because it's a very different process.
Yeah,
it's novel.
But I suppose it was about detective work. I went all around the world interviewing her lovers and her friends and her enemies. And I spoke to some people who really didn't like her at all. But part of that process is, tracking people down, doing detective work. And also just the very strange thing about looking through Highsmith's archives. Like on the second day, I think it was there, there's one of Highsmith's really early diaries from 1942. And I opened the page and on the frontispiece, it said, look before and look behind. There's still time to change your mind. Perfidy no time assuages. Cursed be he who moves these pages. So I got the sense that Highsmith, she was quite a dark personality, and she was always looking over my shoulder. But I tried to find some kind of sense of humanity, really. I mean, she had very, very unpleasant sides to her character, which are unforgivable, especially in this kind of current climate. But I tried to understand what lay behind all those aspects of her life that were problematic.
So what was your conclusion when you finished the book? Had your idea of her completely changed when you started it?
Yeah, I knew her obviously a lot more, and I was trying to be sympathetic to her. because her mother tried to abort her before she was born. Her life was shattered by the appearance of a stepfather who she hated, and she had these murderous thoughts about killing him when she was about 3. She grew up gay in Texas in the 1930s, which was really difficult, and she was sexually abused as a young child. Her real father tried to seduce her when she was 17. So she had her fair share of really traumatic experiences.
Yeah. And did you find that when you began writing, apart from her life, did her work itself influence it? Because obviously, the books themselves are,
because they go
quite complex, and there's a lot of dark stuff in the books themselves. Did you find that helped push you towards writing your first book?
I think so. Definitely following that sort of model of people's obsession with one another, and kind of like this toxic psychology, the dark psychology, and we can all understand what it's like to be obsessed with somebody or somebody else. Stalking, she was a great book. It's all about following people, and we all do that in little ways or in perhaps
Do we?
big ways. And many people have told me and shared their experiences of obsession with me over the years. So I think it's kind of a common human
Obsession with you?
experience. No, not with me.
So obsession is a big part of it. We are both big fans of a particular novel by Highsmith, This Sweet Sickness, and it's one of the ones that not many people seem to have read. I mean, everyone seems to know The Talent of Mr. Ripley and perhaps Stranger on the Train, the ones made into films. But This Sweet Sickness, why do you think that's the one that you seem to be?
Well, I think it's the one that really embodies her personality. So probably not many people know about this novel. It's published in the 60s, and it's about a man called David Kelsey who becomes obsessed with a fantasy girlfriend. So he's had a relationship with a woman called Annabelle who breaks up with him, but he can't understand why she's done that. And each night he sets the dinner table for 2 people. There's 2 martinis. It's all really beautiful, beautiful aesthetics. But Annabelle doesn't exist. She's not there sitting across from him, and he's trapped in this obsession. And it's about what happens when obsession takes over a life.
Yeah. So obsession is a big thing.
Yes.
Which other novels of hers would you, if you were going to say to all the people in this room, have a go at Highsmith? Because the thing about Highsmith is that people have either read nearly everything by her or nothing at all. So if you really want to persuade someone to give her a go, what would you say?
Well, if you've read nothing, I'd start with the 2 famous ones, Strangers on the Train and The Talent of Mr. Ripley. And then if you're hooked, I'd move towards things like The Blunderer, and some of her short stories, which are very, very dark, but some of them very funny as well. And then you can sort of try the Ripley series, actually, because there's 5 novels in total. So it depends how committed or how obsessed with writing you want to be. I think people tend to do get, there is sort of, I think people want to say start. They either hate her because of the kind of warped, twisted psychology, because it's too dark for them, or they gobble everything up.
I did that, and I found out before I read your biography, I found I really quite liked her, and I kind of almost felt for her. I saw an interview with her where she talked. She was very shy and really nothing like you'd imagine her to be from the writing, and you felt as if she was just living in a kind of in a bunker, all the time. Did you get that from her archives?
I think she always knew there was something odd about her personality. And people, I think I interviewed one of Highsmith's friends who knew her really well, who's an educational psychologist, who said that perhaps she was suffering from some kind of Asperger's syndrome. But obviously this was the time when that wasn't diagnosed, people weren't they didn't recognise it. But it probably would make kind of sense, I think. And obviously we knew that Highsmith had all these awful traumatic experiences, but I think it's the writing that saved her. I mean, one of her friends told me that if she hadn't written these dark books, she might have committed a crime. She had this real interest in dark psychology. She would, at night she would go outside her house and pretend to be a criminal sometimes. And the stalking aspect, obviously we know what she did, that famous episode that inspired The Price of Salt, or Carol. A woman came into Bloomingdale's when Highsmith was working there, in the toy department, and Highsmith, this was right at the beginning of Highsmith's career, so she didn't have very much money. So she was working the Christmas shift in Bloomingdale's in New York, and into the store comes this very glamorous older woman with blonde hair, and who left her delivery details for her daughter, for a doll to be delivered to their house. And then, the next day, Highsmith gets on the train, she gets on a bus, and she stands outside this woman's house in New Jersey, and she says, she wants to kiss her, but she also wants to put her hands around her neck and strangle her. So, it's this idea that, love and obsession and hate all bundled up in the same kind of emotional cortex for her.
And then she went on to write a whole novel about somebody who doesn't actually murder someone, but wants to pretends to murder someone. Which one is that? That's the one.
There's a couple. There's the one that's set in El Sur in Suffolk. Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a storyteller.
Yeah, that's right. And the character actually doesn't commit a murder, but wants the police to think he has, to see what it feels like to be a murderer. I mean, that's very close to her, wasn't it?
Yes, exactly.
So, you've got another book out, Five Strangers. Is that also Highsmithian?
I suppose that's, yes, it's under a different name, because it's sort of psychological suspense.
Now, could we just pause there? Why is it under a different name? Because this sounds Highsmithian in itself.
Yes.
You in a different name.
Yes, my double, exactly, which is a great concept that Highsmith was interested in.
Yeah.
I wrote a series of historical crime novels with Agatha Christie as my central character. So they're sort of set between 1926 and 1930. And they're kind of a homage to the golden age of Christie, really. So it's Agatha Christie as detective.
They're under what name?
They're under my own name,
right.
Andrew Wilson.
Yeah.
So they came out, the latest one was published last year, I think. But I wanted to do something very different and more contemporary about somebody living today, and it's psychological suspense. And my pen name is EV.Adamson, which I like to think is a gender fluid name, because it's Eve and Adam, all blended together.
But did your agent think it was a good idea to not capitalize your success in other literary fields?
I think it's just a kind of a marker that there's something else going on.
Okay.
I mean, I think there's a great tradition in crime fiction writing. Not that I'm comparing myself to Ruth Rendell in any kind of way, but obviously she wrote her Barbara Vine novels as well.
Yeah, of course. And Highsmith herself wrote under a pseudonym, but for different reasons.
Yes, of course, yeah.
She wrote
Price of Salt.
Yeah. Do you think if she was alive today, and if she'd been born at a different time, she'd actually be quite a hip, kind of writer now? She would be adored by the media for being so outrageous and lesbian and.
I think she'd be cancelled now. I mean, her views today, you can't really repeat them because they're so objectionable. So I think she would not be. I think some publishers actually would find it difficult to publish her with some of those kind of views. And actually, at the end of her life, she didn't have an American publisher.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So who was publishing her?
What now?
No, who was publishing her then?
Oh, well, she was published by Bloomsbury in Britain, but in America she was published by Knopf, and then they dropped her.
Yeah. So didn't she submit a few novels to?
I think Atlantic.
Yeah. So she had a strange relationship with America, didn't she? Because she was, she was very homesick at some time. She lived in France, is that right? And Switzerland most of her life.
Yeah.
So what was her relationship with America, her home country?
I think she had a very difficult, problematic relationship with America because, I mean, when you sort of read her thoughts on America, they're very prescient and they really tell you what America is like today. I mean, she was always complaining about the fact that it was consumerist, materialist, the ideas of certain politicians being toxic, and the fact that they couldn't accept difference in the outsider figures. So she always felt much more comfortable in Europe.
And how did she get on with the politics of say, France or Switzerland? Did she
She was a strange one when it came to politics. She admired Margaret Thatcher because Highsmith loved people who didn't pay very much tax. And the reason why Highsmith left France because the tax authorities raided her home, and she really didn't want to pay so much tax, so that's why she moved to Switzerland. But even when she lived in Switzerland, she was driving across the border to get spaghetti because it was cheaper.
Oh my God.
So she had a very odd relationship to money.
She did. Did that come from her background?
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she grew up in Fort Worth, in Texas, as a poor household, I think.
Yeah.
So she always thought, I think she had that attitude that I worked really hard. So why should I support people who don't work so hard?
And how did her family react to her literary success? Did they live to see?
Yeah, her mother who had dementia but lived for a very long time, and she had a toxic relationship with her mother. And Highsmith resented having to pay her nursing home fees, or back in America. But she had a very difficult relationship with her mother.
Yeah.
I think when the mother came to stay with her in Suffolk, they got on such they had this terrible fight. I think Highsmith's mother came at her with a coat hanger and attacked her, and the local doctor had to be called over to sedate both of them.
So why isn't there a film about Highsmith's Suffolk years? It sounds like a pretty
Mummy
strange-
dearest.
Yeah. Why was she in England in the first place?
She was just coming to visit.
But she lived here for a while.
Who, sorry? Highsmith?
Highsmith,
No,
yeah.
she came to England because she fell in love with an English woman who lived in London but who was married and had a child.
Right.
So she bought this house in Suffolk with her, and the married woman would come up from London to visit her. Sometimes she would bring her husband and child.
So it's This Sweet Sickness all over again, isn't
Yes,
it?
yeah, exactly.
There's such a bit of that.
And I couldn't name the lover because she took a legal injunction out on me to prevent me from naming her. So in my book she's called Mrs. X.
So what's her real name?
We can't say.
Oh.
We can't say. No, I signed a document that said I could never reveal her name.
Really? Until after she dies you can?
Is she in the room?
Yes. Look at each other.
Is she alive? Is she still alive?
She is, I think, yeah.
But when she dies, will that change that injunction?
It may not do, because it's a Swiss document.
Oh.
And the privacy law in Switzerland protects people who are dead as well as
Really?
alive.
Oh,
Forever and
God.
ever.
Forever and ever.
Wow.
And it's a law that comes from the Nazi gold scandal.
Ah.
That's how it all started.
So do you think was she genuinely happy in Switzerland, or was she only there for the tax breaks?
I think she liked the orderliness of Switzerland. Everything works in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And she just, she liked the regimented routine of life.
I mean, I get an impression from your biography and other sources that she really enjoyed the process of writing, and as you say, if she didn't have this sort of writing routine, she would have gone out and strangled someone. And didn't she have a little setup on the desk on an ashtray and certain... Did she drink while she wrote?
She started drinking beer early morning. She had this idea that it was nutritional. So that's how she got her nutrition. And then as the day progressed, she moved on to whiskey.
While writing?
While writing, yeah. She needed it for writing, really. I mean, she just needed it to live. By that point.
Yeah, I mean, some writers can't. I mean, do you drink when you write?
I
Most of us
don't.
don't the drinking
I haven't
comes
reached that stage
afterwards. Yeah, so I mean, seeing pictures of her, she was, she was very skinny, wasn't she? She didn't eat much. There was a sort of decline in. I mean, she was a gorgeous, beautiful young woman, wasn't she, in her youth? And then she ended up. I mean, I don't know. I don't like people who sort of judge her appearance and say, well, she drank too much and smoked too much, so she looked terrible. I mean, that was her choice.
I think also she didn't really eat very much as well.
Yeah.
So she had been anorexic in her teenage years, and she would have a little bit of spoonful of peanut butter or something.
Yeah.
She would get these wonderful cuts of meat. I interviewed some of her friends. When she lived in France, she would go to the French markets, and the friends would think, "Oh God, we're going to have such wonderful food," and they'd smell the meat that was cooking. Of course, the meat was given to the cats.
Yeah.
And all the best cuts, and I think the bones that was left would be given to the guest.
Yeah. I do remember saying, I think in your biography, a tale of someone going to stay with her for a weekend in France, and there just being no food whatsoever.
Yeah.
The house being freezing, the cats got all the attention. So not a very good hostess.
No, not at all. But I think, you know, she was living in her own kind of world, and you know, the great thing about her is the fact that, you know, she wrote these wonderful books that are still being read and will always be read.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main thing you've got to remember. And also, I think she could be very civilized when she, you know, stayed with people. She had great friends who were very loyal to her. They appreciated her sense of humour. And when I spoke to Kate Kingsley-Scatterbull, Marcus, my partner, remembers that, you know, she always said that if she was with us now, we'd be having such a good time with her.
Yeah.
So I think with some people, she could be very, very funny. And she was cranky, of course, and she had her problems. But, you know, she was a very complex human being.
Did she like fame?
No, she hated fame. She would go, I don't know if you've seen any of those kind of TV interviews, there was a famous one Sarah Denant did on The Late Show, where she tried to tease out of her the inspiration for Carol or The Price of Salt. And it's like one-word answers.
Yeah.
And Sarah Denant had gone all the way to Switzerland, you know, took a camera crew from The Late Show, and thought this was going to be a great scoop, and you know, just had one-word answers repeatedly. But you know, that's her. She wasn't going to give anything away. But the interesting thing was, she knew a biography was going to be written after her death, and she left very clear instructions that should be done. She was given the opportunity to burn a few bits of diaries or papers, which she did, but not very much. So the bulk of it exists, and the bulk of it is extraordinary. And the diaries are on sale tonight, and you can read them. You can see how shocking they are and how revelatory they are.
And you've read all of these diaries. So
Yes.
do you think they've chosen well in this
Yeah, no,
selection?
it's a great selection. I mean, to get down from 8,000 pages to 1,000 printed pages, and it's the diaries and notebooks combined is what they've done. I think it's a really readable selection. My only caveat is that I think sometimes you need a bit of biographical context, which is not there. That's not provided.
She's a very unknown quantity, isn't she? Unlike, say, Hemingway, you know, or Scott Fitzgerald, people know something about their lives, but people know nothing about their lives, do they? Okay, well, I think we could maybe throw it up into questions, or we're doing that.
Also, I think there's also Humphrey here, who's the son of one of Highsmith's editors.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Who's Roger Smith. Yes. Sorry to drag you into
That's
this.
fine. That's fine. My only thought for the day is I saw Throwing Mama from the Train when I was about 18. Pat Highsmith stayed with us when I was about between the ages of about 10 and 12 now and again on her way to France or Switzerland. She was by then quite ravaged by booze and smoking. I'm certain that the nasty old mother in Throw Mama from the Train was cast to look like Pat Highsmith.
What would you say the similarities between Agatha Christie and Patricia Highsmith are, if any?
Well, there are some similarities, but obviously, traditionally they stand at opposite ends of the crime spectrum tradition writing, because Agatha Christie really is all about the restoration of order at the end of her books. Justice comes in, people get killed who deserve to get killed, people are arrested, and everything's tied up, mostly, in most of her books. In Highsmith's book, you're on the side of the killer, you want the killer to get away with the crime. At the end of each of the Ripley books, you're, the sense of triumph when Ripley goes off into the sunset with his winnings or his identity fraud. And you want him, at the end of each book, you want him to get away. So, she's such a transgressive writer when it comes to the crime writing tradition. The way they kind of come together, I think, is in one really interesting book that Agatha Christie wrote called Endless Night. So Agatha was the end of her career, this was in the 60s, and it's written in the first person from the perspective of a working class man, and I'm convinced that Highsmith read that book and I think it does influence some of the Mr. Ripley characteristics as well. So I think there is some kind of crossover. Highsmith really hated Agatha Christie. She said, "What's the point of a whodunit? Who cares who done it?" She really didn't see the point of it. But I think Agatha would have read Ripley to write Endless Night.
Oh, the other way around.
Sorry, the other way around.
Yeah. Highsmith was very attached to Ripley, wasn't she, as a character? I heard a story, I think in your book, about her having a picture of him, and she's rather than signing it Patricia Highsmith, she signed it Tom Ripley. She really identified with this.
Yes.
So, out of all her characters, what is it about Tom Ripley that you think was so endearing to her?
I think it's life as she wanted to live could be led through the life of Tom Ripley. So she would have liked, to have had the harpsichord and the nice art collection. I mean, she did have some beautiful objects in her houses, and she would have liked, the kind of experiences of, the wonderful dining, the kind of the swish interiors, that level of wealth, which I think she liked.
Didn't she have the sort of?
I think by the end, she had a great deal of money, which she didn't spend, and which she left to Yaddo, the writer's colony.
Yeah.
But I think she admired him. She admired his sense of action. She admired the fact that nobody stood in his way. If he killed somebody, he had to kill them. And her defence was that, they were always quite either boring and unpleasant people. So that's the defence. If any of us commits murder, just say they were boring or unpleasant.
And then it's all right. And of course, he was a man. So do you think there was a living a life through the man's eyes?
Yes. I mean, it's interesting, when the diaries came out, there were a few commentators that asked me whether, in this kind of day and age we're living in now, she would have liked to transition into a man. And it's a really interesting question. I don't think there's a neat answer at all to that, but I think she would have been very interested in that idea of transitioning. But then, she was a great lover of women as well, and a very strong lesbian identity, even though obviously she hated lesbians and she hated women.
Misogynist, a female misogynist. Did she ever achieve? Was she constantly looking for, a kind of a girlish kind of romance, and presumably never finding it?
She was a great romantic, actually, and even though she had lots of sex, I think that's a sense that she was actually a romantic. She was always looking for the kind of the perfect partner, and nobody really stood up to the kind of ideal. So if she fell in love with somebody, she would reinvent them in her mind, and obviously the kind of fantasy image that she had and kept in her mind and her heart was not the one that was opposite her, or in bed with her, or at the kitchen table with her. So she always lived through fantasy, and that's obviously what her books are about.
Yeah, I mean, that's a writer's way of
Can I step in now and just say that these books are available to buy from Sam, who's come from Burley Books, Burley Fisher Books, so you can get them signed and buy all your friends' Christmas presents from Andrew Wilson. Thank you very much.